When I was growing up, I had no idea who I was. I had no idea if I was good enough as a man, but I was definitely haunted by this thought that I'm not good enough. And as I kept wrestling with that question, I kept looking around me at other guys, whether they were my age or whether they were older. Some of them I knew, some of them I didn't know, but I kept looking to them to like compare myself to them, because in my mind, like, they were the standard. If I wanted to be good enough, they were who I needed to look to see how I was doing, to see if I was making progress or not. So I kind of looked at them as like, those are the 10 out of 10 guys. So if they're the 10 out of 10s, then like, what do I need to do to actually get to that point as well? So I built a life that society told me and their example told me that like, this is how you should actually do this. So I embarked on that quest, you might say. I started building all of these characteristics that I thought were going to make me that 10 out of 10 guy. And frankly, it worked for a little bit. It felt good to build my body, to get attention from girls, to get some more measurable success in career types of situations. But then after a while, after the few days of feeling good, it wore off. And it wore off pretty fast. And I started realizing like, all right, I'm not fulfilled. I can maybe get some quick hitters from these little successes, these little wins, but I'm not fulfilled. And long term, if I keep on this path, I'm just going to keep on really tearing myself down inside just to look like I've got it together on the outside. And it's frankly, it wasn't healthy. So I had to take a step back. And when I did, I realized like, okay, maybe what society's telling me I need to be in order to be that 10 out of 10 guy, maybe that's not really the answer. So one by one, I started looking at parts of myself and types of decisions that I was making. And I had to decide, okay, is this something I want to keep or is it something I need to toss? So I'm going to take you through this list of the areas that I decided to change. Some areas I totally threw out, some areas I kept parts of, but as I started to shift, society's definition, I guess if I kept that standard of judgment to see how I was doing, I probably would be considered less of a man or less than a 10 out of 10 man in their eyes. But the more changes I kept making, the more fulfilled I felt and the healthier I was, and the depth of my relationships continued to increase. So here's that path. So I went from what society would have called a 10 out of 10 man, and then I dropped down to a 9 out of 10 man when I started going to therapy. All right. So I was opposed to going to therapy. I was that typical dude who's like, nah, I got this. If I need advice, I can talk to a friend or maybe a mentor or something, but I don't need therapy. But then I went through an insanely tough breakup. At that point, I was overwhelmed. I had to admit I couldn't handle it myself. So roll into a therapist's office, and for the first few sessions, he was really helping me change my perspective on certain situations and just helping my mindset and emotions to feel better in the moment. But I realized something was missing at the root. And so in the sessions, a lot of times we'd have some really good like aha moments, like, oh, I never thought of that before. That's awesome. And it helped me figure out kind of more of who I was. And I realized like most of the time in my life, even before therapy, I had just kind of just lived in my head, or like what we therapists call intellectualized. I had cut myself off from the neck down, and everything was all just thinking and rationalizing. And there was never any integration of the thoughts and the body, like that mind-body connection where the emotions live in our body. So one day we had a really good aha moment, really good breakthrough. And I did what I normally would do. I grabbed my little notebook next to me and I wrote down the aha moment. And he goes, stop it. I go, what? He goes, stop writing it down. Feel it. Feel your emotions. You're intellectualizing everything. You got to feel stuff or you're always going to be stuck. And I thought, oh, he's yelled at me. But looking back, I'm like, all right, I'm glad he yelled at me because, yeah, he was right. I was stuck in this pattern of like, okay, there's a good fact that I should know and that I should keep up in my head. And it just always remained knowledge. But knowledge is just information. We need something deeper. We need the body to come into play with integration for us to actually to develop and to grow and to be set free. So in that moment, therapy became not just a helpful source of better thoughts, but a huge connector for me and connecting to my body, allowing my emotions to do their job, and then experiencing the freedom and the more, frankly, just feeling better that comes with that integration. So once my therapist helped me to actually start feeling my feelings and connect into my body, it broke something loose in me, and it moved me from a 9 out of 10 man to an 8 out of 10 man, because I actually started crying for the first time in 4 years. All right. I had just shut myself down. I don't remember exactly the moment when I did that, but I remember it had been years since I actually started crying. And I remember one of the reasons for that was growing up, my dad had a fairly prominent position in the city. And I always remember just people knew who I was when I was in elementary school, like 6, 7, 8, 9 years old. And I didn't know who they were. They would, I remember there was one time where we went to a basketball game, and I was with my parents, and my parents would talk to the adults, and all of a sudden they would turn to me and say, "Hey, Trey, how are you?" And I remember thinking at 7 years old, like, I didn't introduce myself to you, and my parents didn't tell you my name, but you know my name. And now all of a sudden you're talking to me while there's all these people in the stands, and it feels like they're looking at me. And I just remember looking around thinking, wow, maybe everybody in this gym knows me and is watching me. And it gave me this sense that, like, I better have it all together at all times. And nobody ever, like, told me that explicitly. Nobody was putting pressure on me to come across that way. But when you feel enough eyeballs on you at any age, but especially like as a 7-year-old, you just start making some assumptions like, okay, well, if these people know my name and they're watching, then I better be stoic and I better be bulletproof. And if I have some sort of an emotion, I better just stuff it. And it makes me think of another story when I was in 4th grade. I was the new student. I was the only new student at an elementary school. And everybody else had been together since kindergarten. So they all knew each other. I'm the only new kid on the first day of school. So I'm already nervous, wondering if I'm going to fit in. And I remember there was a set of steps that led down into the gym because gym was our first class at that day. So I walked down those steps, walked into the gym, and I see all of my classmates sitting in a circle, guys and girls just talking to each other. And as I approach the circle, I mean, I'm nervous. My heart's pounding like, what are they going to think of me? Are they going to like me? All the stuff that even now as adults we think when we're the new person. And as I get right up to the circle and I'm ready to sit down with them, one of the guys looks up at me and he goes, "Damn, I'm glad I'm not looking into a mirror right now." And in that moment, I wish that a trap door could have opened up and just like dropped me right out of their sight. Because I mean, I wanted to cry right there in the moment, but I couldn't. I knew, like, if I fall apart right here, everybody's gonna laugh at me and everybody's gonna think stuff. And so a moment like that, I had already kind of trained my nervous system, like, all right, don't feel, don't show anything, just stay stoic. And so that moment, there was pain, and I remember feeling the pain, but I just had to just keep plowing through, and just keeping on plowing through helped me in a lot of circumstances. But eventually I needed to slow down and take a pause and actually let some of the emotions out, because I didn't know at that time that emotions that don't get felt actually rot us from the inside out. So it created this pattern in me where I wouldn't allow myself to feel. But there was a moment finally in therapy where he just said, "You know what? The stuff you got going on in your life right now, that's a lot of stuff. It's a full plate." And for whatever reason, that moment when he said that, it just burst something in me. It was like a volcano of tears came up, and I had no idea that was even in there ready to erupt. But when he affirmed that, like, the stuff that I was going through in those moments, in the months leading up to that, when he said that was a lot, something not just agreed with what he was saying, but it felt set free, that I'd finally been seen and acknowledged that, like, yeah, this is terrible stuff. So that moment of letting the emotions out, letting those tears out, so cleansing. And then it helped me just to become a better man from there. But in society's eyes, oh no, I cried, so I must be less of a man. So when that therapist acknowledged that, yeah, what you're going through is rough, and then it broke something loose in me. The other thing it broke loose in me is that maybe it is okay to like reach out and ask for help every now and then, because man, that scared me. And I think it scares most people, especially guys. We think that the strong way to do it is just to shoulder all the weight ourselves. And that's definitely what I was doing too. But in that moment, I started realizing like, okay, not only can I not handle all this, everything myself, but I might actually live a little better if I ask for help. So in that moment, when I decided to start asking for help on certain things, I moved from an 8 out of 10 man to a 7 out of 10 man. And it reminds me, I think I learned this lesson about just handling it all yourself from my grandfather. My granddad remains one of my heroes. He died long ago, but I still think about all the wisdom he passed along to me. And he grew up in the Depression. He went to World War II. He shouldered a lot of the responsibility of his family for their financial needs and all kinds of other needs. So if anybody could handle everything himself, it was him. So I remember just watching the way he would run his business when I would just walk around with him during the days as a kid, and every detail was taken care of. He was notorious for showing us how to do just the most menial tasks and showing us with every acute attention to detail, like sweeping the floors. He would have us go sweep a floor, but then 15 seconds later, he'd walk up and take the broom from us and say, no, do it like this. So everything had to be done perfectly right. And he got a lot accomplished. And so I think in my young mind, I just thought, well, that's the way you got to do it. If you want something done right, you do it yourself. And then if you have to teach somebody else, then so be it. But you handle it yourself. And I kind of just kept on living like that until one day, I don't know, a few years ago, there was some situation, I can't remember all the details, but one of my friends knew that I was going through a rough time, and I kept on just not letting him help. I just said, no, I got this. I appreciate it, but I'm good. I got it. It's all right. All the different cliches we use. And he said, no, man, let me be a blessing. If you'll let me help you, it'll actually help me probably more than it helps you. So just allow me to come into your life and be a blessing in this moment. And it hit me. It's like, oh yeah, it's not just me feeling weak, like I'm some charity case that people pity. It's not really what's going on. Is that we're wired, everybody's wired with this desire to help somebody, to sacrifice, to make somebody else's day better or even their life better. And if we don't get to do that, then we don't feel as fulfilled. So I was really ultimately being selfish by just trying to handle it all myself and not let somebody else do the thing that they were wired to do. This next one might get a little weird, might get a little uncomfortable, but I'm trying to model vulnerability here because that's crucial for all of us. So here we go. I went from a 7 out of 10 man to a 6 out of 10 man when I stopped having casual sex. When I was in this mode of just chasing the next hookup, it was the classic cycle of like, I would start out kind of feeling either bored or just not how I wanted to feel, kind of down low. And then I would start the hunt, and I would kind of get a little bit of an adrenaline rush from that hunt, kind of seeking out the next hookup, and the excitement would build, and then the hookup would happen, and then feeling on top of the world, feeling like the man. But then inevitably, a few minutes later, boom, crashed back down to where I was feeling before. And that cycle just kept repeating and kept repeating. And after a while, I thought, well, maybe it's a problem. I just need some different girls on my roster. So I would kind of find different girls. And it was just every variation I could try just to spice things up. But I kept coming back to the fact that like I was feeling flat. I wasn't excited about really anything that used to make me excited anymore. My energy levels were down, and I couldn't figure it out because like this math equation wasn't working. The math wasn't mathing anymore. Like I was getting the sex, the hookups I wanted, but I wasn't feeling the way I wanted to for very long. So like what's missing here? I just dummy here couldn't figure it out. So finally I realized, all right, what direction am I heading long term? I'm chasing the short term and I'm getting the pleasure in the short term, but what direction is this putting me every step I take in this direction? I realized the destination that this direction is taking me ain't the destination I wanted, because I wanted to find a wife. I wanted to find a woman that I felt like I could spend the rest of my life with. And every hookup I had just took me further from that destination. And I think it was Andy Stanley who said it's direction that determines your destination. It's not your intention. So yeah, my intention was to find a wife, find someone who to start a family with. And I said my intention, but my direction was totally different. So like it'd be like saying, all right, I want to go down to Florida, but you get on the highway and you start driving dead west and you end up in California. Well, yeah, your intention was to go to Florida, but your destination was California because that was the direction you took. And so I realized, oh, wait a minute. The short-term stuff, the things that society was telling me to chase to be the man, it actually was lying to me and taking me off the course that I said that I wanted. And then the other thing I realized is that I was rewiring my brain. Every time I would go through that cycle, I was telling my brain, basically, you know what? The short term is the way to go, because what the psychology phrase is, whatever fires together, wires together. So the habit I kept doing was the habit that my brain kept building and making stronger and stronger. So every time I went through that cycle, my brain learned that, like, yeah, this is the way we need to go. Imagine a cornfield that there's been no tractor has ever gone through that cornfield. Well, if that tractor chooses one path through that cornfield and then keeps on driving back and forth over that same line, there's going to be a clear road, so to speak, in that field. And that's going to be the way that all the tractors and all the different farm vehicles go from that point on. It's the same with our thought patterns. When we think the same thing over and over and then do the same thing over and over, our brain is going to get even stronger and push in that direction in the future. The problem is when we try to change that habit, that's a really tough habit to change because your brain has been so strongly trained in that direction. And the older we get, our brain gets less changeable, less malleable is the psychology term for that. So I didn't even know it, but I was building up all kinds of terrible wiring in my brain. And therefore I was building up a whole lot of work that I was setting myself up to have to do to get free from this habit. So I moved from a 6 out of 10 to a 5 out of 10 man when I stopped making money my priority. Now look, money's a neutral thing. There's nothing wrong at all with money. In fact, some people take a verse of the Bible out of context and they'll claim that money is the root of all evil. That's not what it says. It says the love of money is the root of all evil. Money is neutral enough to where you can do something really amazing with it, or you can do something pretty destructive with it. And usually that destruction first happens in us. Now, I'm not going to hang out on this topic very long because I feel like there's just so many people that say this same message and you've probably heard the same, but I'll just give you a quick little psychology angle on this and how it fit into my version of it. There's this psychology term called focalism. And if you look at that first part of the word focal, whatever we focus the most on, we think that thing is going to just fix everything in us and make us feel amazing. So we get these blinders on. And for a while, I had the blinders on or the focalism on toward money because, again, following society's message of like, you better be a 10 out of 10 man, which means you better get rich quick and then have that reputation of the guy that's got it all. Money is one of those recipes or one of those ingredients of the recipe. So I just had that focalism happening. And as I made more money, I realized, yeah, I'm getting the quick little hit off of this. Or if I bought something that was cool, that little high or that dopamine rush, that would last for like an hour or two. Or if it was like a new vehicle, that would last a week or two. And every time it would just kind of come back to normal. Our brain resets back to kind of a normal level, or what we nerd out and call homeostasis. So I just kept realizing, like, okay, money, not a bad thing. I don't need to just take a vow of poverty like a monk or something, but it doesn't do for me what I thought it was going to do. And then along with that, I remembered this quote from John D. Rockefeller. Some reporter asked him one time, they said, look, how much money is enough? Because at that time, he was the richest man in the world. And he said, how much money is enough? Just one more dollar. And I thought, wow, if the richest man in the world says he keeps wanting more and more, in other words, just no matter how much money he had, he always wanted more. I'm like, well, I ain't never going to be that level. So what am I exactly trying to do? What am I hoping this money's going to do for me? And I started to realize it wasn't like it was a night and day light switch moment, but I started realizing, okay, maybe I need to adjust how I think about money. And then I became a 4 out of 10 man when I decided to take off my mask. So earlier I told you how when I grew up, everybody was watching me. I felt like I just had to have it all together. Well, that continued for a long time into my adult years. And one day, one of my friends, he had gone to somebody else with a struggle he was having. I think he had messed up, and he went to one of our other friends to really figure that out and kind of get a game plan. And it kind of hurt me because he and I were close. And I said, well, like, you didn't feel like you could come to me with that? And he goes, dude, you just seem so perfect. I can't relate to you. So when I mess up, I got to go to somebody else that also I know for sure messes up just as bad as I do. And man, that hit me in the face like a 2x4. And I realized, all right, I didn't even realize I was projecting this image of like never struggling and having it all figured out. And just whether it be the way that I stand or the things that I don't show or the things that I don't talk about or like the way that I was dressing, like I realized, I did project this image of like, I don't have any struggles or any mess ups and I'm good. So you don't have to worry about me. And it wasn't from this prideful place. It was just continuing that old habit of like, just don't rock the boat, make sure that you've got it all together and stay stoic. And I realized, all right, I better actually start showing my struggles. So little by little, I would talk about whether I was feeling frustrated about something or a screw up that I had done or just letting people into my world. And it was so awesome. Every time I would do that, every time I would do it, they would then open up as well. It was like I was giving them permission to open up. I was giving them the gift of going second. There's this story of this pastor who he's standing up at the pulpit, he's giving a sermon, and he's actually talking about anxiety. And from the pulpit, he says, all right, I am going to give you all the gift of going second. And he pulls out his bottle of anxiety pills, and he sets them right there on the pulpit, opens the cap, takes one of his anxiety pills right there in front of the whole church crowd. And it says, all right, I'm going first and I'm saying the awkward thing and showing my struggle first so that you all have the freedom to go second, because it's always more awkward for whoever goes first. And I realized what a gift it was that I saw people being able to open up after I did, because somebody's kind of got to break through that awkwardness. And it now has become a strength of mine, is like, I live by this phrase most of the time that, you know what, let's embrace the awkwardness. Let's just be real and let's just see how open we can get. And obviously there's limits to that. You don't want to be vomiting your stuff on everybody, but man, it is so freeing and fulfilling when you just say, all right, look, here's my struggle or here's my mess up. Here's who I really am. And then I became a 3 out of 10 man when I stopped being a victim. I started taking responsibility for my crap. So, for example, I was new to the weight room one day in school, and I just wasn't very strong, and it bothered me. I was insecure. There were other guys who were bigger and stronger than me, and I hated it. And so I started just getting mad, and I slammed the bar down one day in anger, and then the bar skipped and broke a window. So I'm already mad, but then I'm in trouble. And instead of just owning it and just saying, look, I got mad, I shouldn't have done it, that's my fault, my bad, I started saying, nah, the coaches didn't train me well enough. They didn't teach me well enough. And I'm even embarrassed to say that story just because of how weak I was in that moment. I would love to go back in time and just slap the crap out of myself for that. But I look back and I realized, okay, I've at least grown, because there's this thing called a locus of control. In the psychology world, that you either have an internal locus of control, which means you feel like basically life is up to you in terms of within your general control, And then there's external locus of control, which means I really have no determination over my life. I have no control over my actions, and it's all just determined outside of me, and I'm just a victim to whatever happens. The happiest people, research shows the happiest people are the ones who have internal locus of control. And it doesn't mean that everything's your fault and that you can change everything about everybody. In fact, you shouldn't try to change everything about everybody. But generally speaking, internal locus of control means no matter what happens out here, I know I'm going to be good in here because I'm going to respond in a way that keeps me healthy and makes me stronger. And all over social media right now, there is this movement of blame this person and cut that person off, and this wasn't your fault, and this was your parents' fault, and because you didn't get what you needed when you were young, that explains why you are the way you are. So you have a perfectly good reason to stay the way you are, and if a partner can't understand that, then you need to walk away because they don't see your value, and it's all about the other person. And it sure is easier in the moment, and it feels good to blame somebody in the moment. But then we're left empty and we're lacking that fulfillment. So what I realize is I got to start taking responsibility for my junk. And even you might even try going a little bit too far in the other direction of like maybe take responsibility for things that aren't necessarily fully your fault, because there's so much like power and confidence that comes from owning it. Like, yes, I screwed up, my bad. I remember I was in charge of a publication one time, and there were a few typos in it that somebody else was supposed to catch, but it was under my umbrella, and so ultimately it was my responsibility. And the mistake was big enough to where we were going to have to pay to reprint all this publication. And I had two choices. I could throw the person whose fault it was for the typos, I could throw them under the bus, or I could take the responsibility myself. And I decided, all right, I'm just going to go to my boss and say, look, I screwed up. There's a few typos in there, and we're going to have to reprint the publication. It was going to cost us thousands of dollars. I said nothing about the other person. I made no excuses. I said, look, here's the deal. I screwed up. It's my bad. If you need to take it out of my paycheck, do it. And it shocked the guy. He was speechless for a couple minutes, and he finally said, thank you. Thank you for taking ownership. He did not take it out of my paycheck. We reprinted the publications. It did cost more out of the budget, but it was not nearly the negative experience that my brain told me it was going to be, because, our brain can make things seem like they're going to be a whole lot worse. It was such a freeing experience to know that, like, I took ownership, he reacted well, and I realized I could make it through. So the confidence and strength that comes from taking responsibility, immeasurable. So then I became a 2 out of 10 man when I stopped numbing. One day I was talking to a buddy of mine, and we were talking about road trips, and he had taken one recently. And I said, like, what do you listen to when you're just driving around like that? And he says, well, sometimes it's music, sometimes it's podcasts, but a lot of times I'll just sit there for 30 minutes or an hour in just silence while I'm driving. And my jaw hit the floor, because at that point I'd never done something like that. The idea of sitting there in silence for 30 minutes, but for me, 3 minutes, much less 30 minutes to an hour, it was terrifying. And I thought, wait a minute, what's going on in me that I'm running from? Like, what thoughts are trying to creep up to the surface that I instinctively know I need to keep squished down there? And I remember somebody saying this one time. It was a different situation, but the same concept is the person didn't want to sit in silence. And the guy told that person, like, the person that you don't want to sit in silence with, yourself, you are subjecting yourself to everybody else throughout your day, and you won't even sit with yourself for 1 minute. So I was like, okay, what am I running from in myself? And I started realizing that a lot of the stuff I was doing was basically just trying to run from thoughts or keep them numbed out or stuffed down. And sometimes these activities, they can be unhealthy activities, but a lot of times the activities themselves that do the numbing for us, they're good activities. Like, it's exercise, it's work, it's music, it's watching a show or a movie, it's playing a video game. Like, all those things independently are fine, but what's the motive behind what we're doing? I've got friends now who still, when they get home from work, they watch a movie a night, and they're sitting there 2 and 3 hours. And I feel so bad for them, because they they're running from stuff that their body is trying so hard to bring up to the surface so that they can process through it and then move on from it. But whatever we won't feel, it just stays stuffed in us. So I just decided, all right, I'm going to choose discomfort over numbing, because the discomfort is going to suck in the moment. And it might suck for a few days or a few weeks as I start to process some of this uncomfortable stuff and work through some of these knots in my head. But eventually it's going to make me feel better. I just knew that from the research and from my training. And so I decided I'm going through it. I'm no more numbing. Now I still can slip into that pattern sometimes and catch myself. But as soon as I catch myself numbing, then I force myself to sit down and actually feel through and think through whatever it is that's trying to come up to the surface. I made a deal with my thoughts and emotions a while ago. I said, if whenever you come up, I will make a deal with you that I will actually allow you to process through. I might not be able to do it in the moment, but I guarantee later that night I'm coming back and we're going to sit down in silence and allow these thoughts and emotions to come up to the surface so that I can deal with them. And then I became a 1 out of 10 man when I tackled maybe the mountain that was the toughest for me, and in some ways the easiest mountain for me, but I decided to get serious about God. I knew from a young age that he was real. I grew up in church. I never really questioned that he was there, but I always just assumed that he was far away and that he wasn't really approachable. He wasn't involved in details. And mainly, I just assumed he was mad at me because I had spent a long time walking a totally different direction away from him. So I just thought, well, I've gone too far. I'm not even going to worry about it anymore. So I just got so empty, and I was ingrained in all those bad habits that I had talked about earlier. And I tried everything that I knew to try, all the psychology stuff, all the self-help stuff, and nothing was really working. I would just get little moments of freedom, but I would fall right back into the prison of those habits. And one day I realized I actually need to take God himself seriously and take his word seriously. And I remember there was a sermon one time from a pastor, because I had started going back to church again, but I wasn't really all in. I was just kind of dipping my toe in the water, like, don't ask anything of me, I'm just here. But the pastor said in his sermon, he said, look, in the Lord's Prayer, one of the lines is, Lord, your will be done. And the assumption is not my will, but your will be done. And that to me, that scared the heck out of me, because in my life, I loved control. I thought, like, I can figure everything out. I've got this. I don't need anybody's help. So I had this death grip on my life. And the idea of saying, not my will, God, but your will, that to me, that was like, all of a sudden, I'm just going to let go of the steering wheel and then see what happens. No, there was too much fear and too much sense that, like, no, I've got this figured out. But I was also desperate enough to get out of my emptiness. I was just sick of myself. I was sick of all of the sludge and unhappiness that I knew was in there, but kept trying to outrun or numb out and ignore. And so I thought, all right, I can keep on with this same old crappy cycle of me controlling things, but nothing changes if nothing changes. I know I'm going to keep feeling the same way. So I know how this story ends. So I thought, well, I got to try something different. So in that moment, I went back to my house, and I remember getting on my knees, and it wasn't like I released control all at once. It was like I took one little pinky off of the death grip of my life. And I said, God, I'm not ready to say that I want your will, but I do want to want your will. So, like, give me the desire to want your will for my life, and help me to start releasing more and more control of me to you. And in that moment, I'm not going to say there was like some light shining down from heaven and the angels started singing, but I remember feeling like this candle lit in my chest, and something changed in there. And as I stood up, I thought, something's alive in here that wasn't alive before. And again, my problems were still there. I still had stuff to work through, but there was a new life source that was trying to come through me and come out of me. And that relationship with Jesus is what really birthed in me. And I didn't even know it at the time, but that forgiveness, that grace, those words you hear talked about so much, those were the catalysts to really creating the man that he's turned me into and it continues to turn me into. And I am far from a finished product. I think I learn more and more how much more I've got to keep working through and keep growing away from and growing into. But that moment where I said, all right, Lord, I at least want your will. That was that turning point moment of like, I'm changing directions. And now I can look back and see that was when I really became, in the world's eyes, 1 out of 10. But in the way that I was actually designed to live, that was the ultimate point of me turning into the best man I can become. So looking back, I am so glad that I am no longer a 10 out of 10 man in the world's eyes. And it's so much more freeing. I have energy now because before I was just constantly trying to evaluate myself and compare myself to what I thought the measuring stick was. And it was just exhausting. It was maddening. It was the furthest thing from freedom. It truly was a prison because no matter like how many improvements I made and how many wins I got, it still was never good enough because I kept looking at people that was like, they're just a little bit better than me or they're a lot better than me. So I've got so much farther to go. And I knew it wasn't going to work forever. So now I get to just realize like I'm actually becoming the man I was supposed to become. I'm living in the way that my instruction manual says for me to live. I'm a designed being. And so I may as well check with the designer about like, okay, how was I designed? What ways am I supposed to function? What are the things that are going to fulfill me? Those are the things that I'm continuing to learn now. And the more I live out that plan, the happier I've become, the more stable, the more confident, the more fulfilled. And frankly, I get to make more of a difference in other people's lives. And I look around right now and I'm encouraged because I see the tide turning, especially in men. We're starting to reject this idea of what society tells us we need to be. And we're starting to realize like, okay, we're actually built for meaning and for purpose. And we have a calling for our lives to step into. And I'm seeing more and more people do that, but specifically I'm seeing more and more men do that. And I'm honored to be a part of that process. So I'm excited for what's to come even more in that area. And on that note, I want to hear from you all because I'm not doing this for me. I'm hoping some of my stories make an impact on you and make you think about your own stories and the people that have played roles in your lives. So help me. Let's make this a two-way street. Tell me some of your experiences. Tell me some situations you want me to speak about and maybe help you with some of my own stories or maybe some of my mental health content that I've learned. But let's make this something we do together and let's keep on moving forward.